Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have a tiny, creepy hand. This small, lifelike bronze hand was found at the Roman fort of Vindolanda, which is near Hadrian's Wall in England. This artifact was found by archaeologists, and it quickly became quite a mysterious find. The reason for this is because of the fact that it is believed that this artifact may have been associated with a cult. This cult, called Jupiter Dolichenes after the Roman god of course, is a mystery cult that held their secrets close to their chest. This secretive cult existed and was very popular with the Roman army around the 3rd century. This hand is believed to have been left as an offering after there was a major invasion of Scotland that left a large number of people dead. Little more about this bronze statue is known, and that just might make it even creepier. In our number 9 spot today, we have vampire remains. A few years ago in Poland, during a dig, researchers uncovered some skeletal remains that date back to the 14th century, and if this find wasn't already gruesome enough, they quickly figured out this wasn't where the story ended. These skeletons appeared to have posthumous injuries inflicted onto them. Wondering why? Someone's fear of vampires is probably to blame. The skeletons had been decapitated and punctured at the spine, which is extremely gruesome, and then the severed heads were wedged between heavy stones. This is what the lore at the time suggested was the appropriate actions for those who might be vampires in order to prevent them from rising from the dead again. As it turns out, as many of us now know, unfortunately many of these people who were said to be supernatural or evil were probably just suffering from diseases of life. According to researchers, during this time period, people who were suffering from things like kyphosis or perhaps cholera were often thought of as being vampires or witches. In our number 8 spot today, we have Jerry Bibb Balasag's gravestone. This tombstone goes hand in hand with an absolutely insane story of Jerry's life. The story of it is that Jerry, who was a professional wrestler, ended up vanishing after getting in trouble with the law. He was wanted for charges of fraud, and while no one knew his whereabouts for 6 months, when his mother picked up a magazine one day which featured the victims of the horrible cultist Jonestown massacre, she sadly saw her son's picture alongside all of the others. This led to there being a tombstone, of course made for Jerry, although his body would have already been buried in California. So this all happened in 1978, but let's flash forward to 1990. In that year, a man named Ricky A. Weta was arrested for attempting to take someone's life. He was fingerprinted upon his arrest, and who would have thought Ricky turned out to be none other than the presumed dead Jerry. The whole story was of course national news because how could this have possibly happened? In the end, Jerry was caught and brought to justice, but here's the thing, the tombstone. It's a reminder of the Jonestown massacre. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Vampire of Dusseldorf. If you've ever been to a Ripley's Believe It or Not museum, you know those places are stocked full of the weird and wonderful, and this item is absolutely no different. This Wisconsin museum holds the skull from the severed head of the Vampire of Dusseldorf, Peter Carton. Who is Peter? Well, this vampire man was actually a German serial killer from the 1930s. This man committed some incredibly atrocious acts for which he was tried and convicted. He ended up being found guilty for the killing of 9 people as well as attempting to take the lives of 7 more. This guilty verdict led to him being sentenced to beheading, which took place in 1931 when Peter was 48 years old. I'm not exactly sure why anyone would have wanted to keep his head and skull around, but clearly it happened and now people can go and visit it whenever they feel like it. This might be one museum I might stay away from, to be perfectly honest. I've learned about way too many cursed items here and don't want to mess around with this one. In our number 6 spot today, we have this Viking sword. Archaeologists found a Viking sword called Ulfberg that they were able to date somewhere from 800 to 1000 AD, but upon further research they were absolutely astounded at what they found. This sword was made with a level of sophistication that wasn't seen until at least 800 years later. The carbon content of the sword is 3 times higher than other swords of the time, and due to the impurities that were removed, the iron ore would have needed to be heated to at least 3000 degrees Fahrenheit. This sword was so hard to believe to researchers that a blacksmith named Richard Furrer made a sword similar to this one and used technology that would have been available at the time of its making. He said that the process was the most complicated thing he had ever made, and he even ended up using methods that weren't known to be used at the time. This is all super cool and stuff, but it has me wondering what this sword was used for and what dark parts of history it holds. In our number 5 spot today, we have shackled skeletons. On an archaeological dig in 2016, researchers uncovered a scary sight. Buried in the grounds in Athens, Greece, were at least 80 skeletons, all arranged in neat rows, all with iron shackles on their wrists. Stella Chrysolaki, who is the head of the excavation site, said, quote, "They're all tied at the hands with handcuffs, and most of them are very, very young and in a very good state of health when they were executed." This definitely adds a little bit of horror to this already gruesome scene. Apparently, the method of burial suggests that whoever these skeletons belonged to weren't just the average run-of-the-mill lawbreakers, and they may have been in trouble for some more serious crimes. It is believed that these skeletons might be the supporters of a man named Cylon. In 632 BC, Cylon, who was a former athlete, led an attempted coup in Athens. Of course, since I just called it attempted, it didn't work out, but apparently he then fled the city unharmed. Since he couldn't be punished for his crimes, that only leaves these souls who were just finally uncovered a few years ago. I know these are people who once lived and not artifacts, but I had to put them on this list today because this discovery and story are just something we have to be talking about. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Skirrid Inn Beam. The Skirrid Inn in Wales, upon first glance, just looks like a great place to enjoy some classic pub fare, maybe some fish and chips and a nice ale, but the history it holds tells a very different story because this used to be a place for public hangings. Seems like a weird spot for a pub now, doesn't it? The upper part of the inn used to be the courthouse where people were tried and convicted, and then if the case was made, they were executed on site. It is estimated that around 180 hangings took place right in that spot. They even made the weird decision to keep the original hanging beam up, and the grooves of where the rope wore into the wood can still be seen even to this day. Also, the inn has chosen to keep the original cells where the prisoners were kept just to add the maximum amount of creepiness to the entire place. It's probably haunted as well. This beam serves as a reminder of a different time, I guess, but if we're being totally honest, have things really changed all that much? In our number 3 spot today, we have these sacrificial offerings. In 2018, researchers sent some remote-operated robots beneath the ground in Peru at Chavín de Huántar. These robots stumbled on more than anyone ever imagined when they found a network of 35 interlocked underground tunnels dating back 3,000 years. This is already fascinating and cool, and I have a ton of questions about this whole series of mysterious tunnels, but we've got to save that for another video and instead talk about what it was they found inside of these tunnels, and that is the remains of at least 3 individuals. They had found more remains of other people, but these 3 skeletons specifically stood out because they weren't like the others. They weren't the skeletons of people who had high social standings. These remains they found were from people who were actually sacrificed in rituals. They were able to determine this because of the fact that these bodies were found face down under piles of rocks, which is of course not how people of a high social standing would have been buried at the time. This discovery certainly is a reminder of different times on Earth. In our number 2 spot today, we have an executioner axe. In a Swedish museum, there is an axe that dates back to between 1770 and 1866. This axe isn't just any old axe, however, as it once belonged to an executioner who used it on 88 people. Execution by axe, as you can imagine, was a lot more difficult in reality than movies make it seem, so these axes were specially designed. Rather than being a finely tuned piece of weaponry, these axes were simply designed to crush their way through flesh and vertebrae. I'll save you any more horrible descriptions and just say that the executioner didn't have an easy job for a variety of reasons, and it certainly was a job that required them to stay in great shape. Like I mentioned with the Skirrid Inn Beam, it's definitely good that things have changed since the days of public beheadings for capital punishment, but sometimes things don't really even seem all that different. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Tower of Skulls. There's a city in Serbia that has an interesting tourist attraction. This tower dates back to a time when Serbia was still under Ottoman control in 1809. The first Serbian uprising was not going well, but the leader of the rebels, Stephen Sindelic, was determined to do something to change that. During the final stand at Cigar Hill, Stephen fired a round into a keg of gunpowder, which was inside of a fully stocked armory. You can only guess what this did. Of course, it caused a massive explosion that killed not only him and his men, but also all of the Turkish soldiers who were storming the trenches. In order to get their revenge on this move that Stephen made, the Turks then collected all of the rebels' bodies and removed their heads. They took the bodies of 952 rebels and sent them to Constantinople as trophies. And what did they do with the heads? Well, they built a tower, of course. This tower was 15 feet high, and the Turks built it right at the entrance to town. The skull tower was intended to be a reminder to not mess with them, but the Serbians decided to use their new metal-as-heck skull tower to show them what they were really made of. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Ed Gein's cauldron. Ed Gein's cauldron is a cast iron pot that was found on the property of the infamous serial killer Ed Gein. Gein was known for his gruesome crimes in the 1950s, and when police searched his property, they discovered not only the remains of his victims, but also various macabre artifacts made from human bones and skin. Among these items was the cauldron, which Gein allegedly used to hold body parts during his gruesome acts. After Gein's arrest, the cauldron was kept as evidence for several years before being returned to his family. However, it is said that the cauldron is cursed and has brought misfortune to anyone who has possessed it. According to legend, a man who bought the cauldron in the 1960s met a very quick and horrible demise shortly afterward, and another owner reportedly suffered from a series of tragic accidents. Today, the cauldron's whereabouts are unknown, and it remains a mysterious and haunting artifact associated with one of America's most notorious criminals. In our number 9 spot today, we have John Murrell's thumb. John Murrell's thumb is a small, shriveled digit that is believed to have belonged to John Murrell, a notorious American criminal who lived during the 19th century. The digit is said to possess a powerful curse and is associated with various tales of hauntings and misfortune. One of the most popular legends surrounding the thumb is that it is cursed to bring bad luck to anyone who possesses it. According to the legend, the thumb was cut off from Murrell's body after his execution and passed down through a series of owners who all experienced misfortune and tragedy. It is said that the thumb would cause accidents, sickness, and even death to those who kept it in their possession. Another tale tells of a man who came into possession of the thumb and began experiencing strange occurrences, such as objects moving on their own and eerie whispers in the night. The man eventually became so terrified that he buried the thumb in a field, but it is said that the haunting continued even afterwards. Despite its ominous reputation, John Murrell's thumb has been sought after by collectors and paranormal enthusiasts over the years. Some even believe that the thumb possesses a sort of supernatural power that can be harnessed for personal gain. However, most people are content to leave the thumb where it belongs and avoid any potential consequences of disturbing its resting place. In our number 8 spot today, we have Old Nick. Old Nick, also known as the Swansea Devil, is a legendary figure that dates back to the 1890s and currently resides in the Swansea Museum. During that time, the prestigious St. Mary's Church, located in the town's center, was undergoing renovations, and when a local builder was turned down for the job, he sought revenge. He purchased a row of cottages adjacent to the church, demolished them, and built large brick offices, topping them with a carving of Old Nick. According to legend, he placed a curse on the church himself, declaring that this devil would remain laughing after its destruction. Years later, during World War II, the town was heavily bombed, and St. Mary's, along with most of the town, was destroyed. However, the office building with Old Nick remained undamaged. After the war, Old Nick disappeared, but later resurfaced, prompting a petition to return him to his former spot, and also a counter-petition to keep him far away from the rebuilt church. Currently, Old Nick resides behind glass in the Swansea Museum, and it is said that the glass enclosure is for the protection of visitors. In our number 7 spot today, we have Charles Manson's TV. There are many haunting tales surrounding this TV, and honestly, that makes a lot of sense considering its history, as it was the one that was present in the Spawn Ranch ranch where Manson and his followers resided for a period of time. This ranch was a former movie ranch that had fallen into disrepair and was used as a hideout by the Manson family. It was during their time at the ranch that they planned and carried out their atrocious crimes. The TV was present in the living quarters at the ranch and was said to have played a significant role in Manson's ability to manipulate and control his followers. Manson would often use the TV as a tool to brainwash and indoctrinate his followers with apocalyptic visions and very harmful ideologies. The TV was seized as evidence by the police following the arrest of the Manson family members and has since been sold at auction. The exact whereabouts of the TV at this point in time are unknown, but many have said that the TV is cursed by the evil energy that Manson himself held. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Atlantis Ring. The Atlantis Ring is a clay ring discovered in 1860 in an Egyptian high priest's tomb in the Valley of Kings. Howard Carter acquired the ring and kept it until his death in 1939. The ring is believed to be over 5,000 years old and is decorated with very unique geometric symbols not seen before in Egyptian culture. What makes this story so intriguing is that Carter, who discovered King Tut's tomb, claimed to have worn the ring as a talisman during the tomb's opening, which protected him from the curse. Unlike other members of his team, he did not die a mysterious death afterward. Instead, he attributed his protection to the ring's power. So I guess the ring is kind of like an anti-cursed object due to its association with the protection of Howard Carter. Although replicas are available, none are believed to possess the power of the original Atlantis ring. In our number 5 spot today, we have Bela Lugosi's mirror. Bela Lugosi, the actor who famously portrayed Dracula on screen, owned a mirror that is said to be cursed. According to legend, the mirror was given to Lugosi by a fan who claimed that it was possessed by the spirit of a dead woman. Lugosi allegedly experienced strange occurrences after acquiring the mirror, including seeing the reflection of the woman's face in the glass. He tried to get rid of the mirror, but it reportedly kept returning to him. After his death, the mirror passed through the hands of several owners who also reported strange phenomena associated with it, such as cold spots and apparitions. Some even claimed to have seen Lugosi's face staring back at them from the mirror. Today, the whereabouts of the mirror are unknown, and it remains one of the most mysterious and haunted objects in Hollywood history. In our number 4 spot today, we have Uluru Rock. Uluru Rock is a massive sandstone formation located in the southern part of the Northern Territory in Australia. It is a sacred site for the indigenous people of the area, and it is known as Ayers Rock. Visitors are advised not to take anything from the site as it is considered disrespectful and can bring bad karma. However, some people still choose to smuggle pieces of rock out of the area. This act has reportedly resulted in severe consequences, including bad luck, illness, and even the death of loved ones. The curse associated with these stolen rocks is so strong that it is common for the company that manages the tours of the formation to receive letters of apology with the returned rocks. This phenomenon happens so often that the company expects to receive at least one letter a day. While some may dismiss this as a mere coincidence, the frequency and consistency of these occurrences suggest otherwise. In our number 3 spot today, we have Natalie Wood's yacht. The haunting tales surrounding Natalie Wood's yacht, named the Splendor, have been the subject of speculation and controversy for decades. In November 1981, the actress was on a weekend trip aboard the yacht with her husband Robert Wagner and friend Christopher Walken. The circumstances surrounding her death have remained a mystery, but it is known that Wood drowned in the water near the yacht and her body was found the next morning. The yacht itself has been the subject of strange occurrences and haunting tales ever since. According to reports, strange noises and unexplained occurrences have been observed on board the yacht. Witnesses have reported hearing unexplained voices and footsteps, as well as doors opening and closing on their own. Some have even claimed to have seen the ghostly apparition of Natalie Wood herself, still wearing the same clothing she had on the night of her death. Despite the rumors and tales, there is no concrete evidence to support the idea that the yacht is actually haunted. However, the tragic circumstances surrounding Natalie Wood's death and the mysterious events that have been reported on the yacht have contributed to its reputation as a haunted vessel. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Screaming Skull. The Screaming Skull is housed in Burton Agnes Hall in England and is believed to have belonged to Catherine Anne Griffith. Catherine was the youngest in her family and enjoyed wandering the property, but on one such walk she was attacked and robbed by a group of individuals who left her severely injured. Despite being brought back to the hall, Catherine passed away a few days later. Before her death, she requested that her family remove her head and keep her skull so that they would always have a piece of her with them. Following her burial, the family experienced strange occurrences in the house, including bumps, moans, and screams. It was then said that they decided to fulfill Catherine's request and the strange happenings stopped. However, when a maid found the skull and threw it out of a nearby window, which is a strange thing to do when you find a skull, the strange occurrences began again. Eventually, the family decided to place the skull in a secret spot within the walls of the house so that Anne's spirit could rest in peace. The story serves as a reminder to honor the wishes of those who have passed to avoid any lingering spiritual activity. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Dark Mirror, finishing this list off with another cursed mirror. This one is now a part of the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and Occult, and that in itself is enough to understand why it is considered to be a cursed object. The museum acquired the mirror from its previous owner, who had bought it from a psychic fair. Despite being created sometime around the 1820s or 1830s, the mirror still boasts a beautiful appearance, but it is believed to hold some dark secrets. The former owner reported that every time they looked into the mirror, they saw disturbing images that left them feeling very unsettled. Since joining the museum's collection, guests have also reported similar experiences, seeing reflections of their own dead bodies and other unsettling apparitions.
Number 10. The Ark of the Covenant. If you've seen Indiana Jones, then you're probably familiar with the relic that is known as the Ark of the Covenant. According to the Hebrew Bible, God told Moses to create the Ark of the Covenant in order to store the original tablets on which were written the original 10 Commandments. They did so, making it out of acacia wood and covering it in gold. Around 3,000 years ago, the first temple was built in Jerusalem and the Ark was stored within it until 587 BC, when the temple was destroyed. After that, it's not known where the Ark is or what happened to it, some people saying that it was hidden before the temple was destroyed, while one legend claims that the Ark will not be revealed until the coming of the Messiah, son of David. Some people believe that the Ark was taken to Ethiopia and is stored within a church there, but one scholar said that he had seen this alleged Ark back in World War II and that it's not the original. The Ark of the Covenant is said to have incredible powers, such as instant death if you were to touch it, so if it did come back, who knows what it would be used for. Number 9. Noah's Ark. A very famous story from the Bible tells the tale of Noah, who built a massive boat to hold 2 of every animal to save them from a massive flooding of the earth. The flood took place because God believed that man was becoming too wicked, so he picked the person he believed most righteous, Noah, to survive on the ship with his family and the animals in order to repopulate the planet afterwards. After the 150 days of flooding, the Ark apparently came to rest on top of the mountains of Ararat. This mountain does actually exist in eastern Turkey, though I think we would have noticed by now if there was a giant boat sitting up there. Many explorers have gone in search of the Ark but have yielded no results, most people these days believing that it was just a mythical story and never actually happened. In order to house that many animals, Noah's Ark would have needed to be absolutely massive, so if the boat is out there somewhere, it's probably just small pieces of it. Number 8. The Real Cross. Across the globe, there are hundreds of pieces of wood that people claim to have come from the original cross that Jesus was crucified on. However, it's unlikely that any of these 2x4s actually came from the cross. During the Middle Ages, religious relics were incredibly popular, and supposed pieces of the cross were popping up all over the place, more than could make any sense. Theologian John Calvin famously said that if all these alleged pieces of the cross were gathered together, they would fill the cargo hold of an entire ship. These fake relics aren't just a thing of the past though, and are still incredibly popular today. One relic seller on eBay was reported to have sold many pieces of the cross for around $500 a pop. Right now, there is no piece of the cross that all scholars can agree is authentic, and it's likely that a true remnant will never actually be found, this being because it would have been made of wood and would have decomposed a long time ago. Number 7. The Copper Scroll. The Dead Sea Scrolls were a series of religious manuscripts that were discovered in the mid-1900s in, you guessed it, the Dead Sea. One of the most unusual of these scrolls is known as the Copper Scroll, it getting this name because it is, of course, source inscribed in copper. The text on the scroll describes the hiding places of vast quantities of treasure, including up to 65 metric tons of gold and silver objects. Unfortunately, we haven't actually been able to find any of these treasures, and that's because the hiding places described on the scroll are incredibly cryptic, it not being your typical X marks the spot buried treasure map. They describe the treasure as being hidden in places like in the Great Cistern, which is in the courtyard of the Little Colonnade, and in the eastward looking cave of the Pillar with 2 entrances. Yeah, definitely pretty vague. Whether or not these treasures actually exist is also up for debate. Some people saying they were real and captured by the Romans, and some people saying that they were just totally made up. Number 6. The Q source. The Q source is the name of a hypothetical text that supposedly was used to help write the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke. Most historians believe that the Gospel of Mark was the earliest Christian gospel, and that it and the Q source were used to help the authors of the Gospel of Matthew and Luke write their texts. Archaeologists have so far been unable to find the Q source, leading some people to believe that instead of a written text, it was actually just an oral tradition that was passed down. While there are many copied copies of the famous Christian Gospels, scholars believe it's unlikely that a written Q source would have had many versions, which is what's making it so hard to find to this day. The contents of the Q source is apparently mostly Jesus' sayings, but I guess we'll never know for sure unless a written Q source is actually someday discovered. Number 5. The burial shroud. It's well known that after Jesus' crucifixion, he was buried within a cave, being sealed in behind a large stone. The part of the story that's up for debate is whether or not Jesus actually rose from the dead 3 days later, but we know for a fact he was a real guy who was actually buried in that cave. Mark 15:46 says, "Then Joseph bought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the linen cloth, and laid it in a tomb that had been hewn out of the rock. He then rolled a stone against the door of the tomb." Many explorers and historians have gone in search of the linen cloth or shroud that Jesus was buried in. There have been numerous forgeries over the years, most famously the Shroud of Turin, which was actually created in the Middle Ages. What happened to the real shroud remains unknown to this day, and people say that it's unlikely we'll ever actually be able to find it. Number 4. The Ring of St. Edward. In the year 1005, St. Edward the Confessor was born into the royal family, and in 1042, he took the throne. He was viewed by the people as a deeply religious leader who did many good things, like removing unjust taxes, healing the sick, and taking a vow of chastity. He also built a cathedral that would come to be known as Westminster Abbey. St. Edward healed the sick using a sapphire ring that he had, and one day he was approached by a beggar who asked him for money. He didn't have any money on him, so he instead removed his ring and gave it to the beggar. Years later, pilgrims who were stranded in the Holy Land were rescued by St. John the Evangelist, who had the ring that Edward had given the beggar. He told the pilgrims to return to Edward and give him the ring, and to tell him that he would be dead in 6 months. And he was. The ring was kept in Westminster Abbey for many years, but it and many other relics went missing after the dissolution of the monastery. To this day, the ring has not been located, though it's believed that the sapphire from the ring is the center jewel on the imperial state crown. Number 3. The Veil of Veronica. The story of the Veil of Veronica was not recorded in its current form until the Middle Ages, and tells the story of a meeting between Saint Veronica and Jesus. She encountered Jesus along the Via Dolorosa and stopped to use her veil to wipe the blood and sweat from his brow. When she did so, Jesus' image became copied onto the veil. After that moment, it then apparently gained mythical powers, like quenching thirst, allowing the blind to see, and even raising people from the dead. There is written evidence that the veil was displayed in the 13th to 15th centuries, but after 1527, its fate is unknown. Some people believe that it was destroyed in Rome, or had even been stolen and made its way through taverns. After its disappearance, many copies started to pop up, despite the Pope prohibiting them from being made. In 1629, he then ordered that all copies of the veil be destroyed, and if you refused to give up your copy, you would be excommunicated from the church. Number 2. The Nephilim. In the Bible, the Nephilim were a group of incredibly large and strong beings who lived both before and after the flood, being described as being the offspring of fallen angels and human and women. Many critics of the Bible laugh at its description of supposed giants, but if these creatures actually existed, it means that there are probably remains of them out there somewhere. Giant human skeletons that would squash any doubt that they had existed. Archaeological evidence from the ancient times does exist that could show the existence of giants, though it has never really been fully analyzed, as most people brush it off as not having been possible or real. There are other recordings and even art pieces that may also lend credit to the fact that these giants had once existed, and many people believe that the skeletal evidence is out there somewhere, just waiting to be discovered. Number 1. The Holy Grail. If you've seen Monty Python, then you're probably pretty familiar with this one. The Holy Grail, or the Holy Chalice, is the cup that Jesus apparently used during the Last Supper, which he had with his disciples before his crucifixion. The Bible says, "Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, 'Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins.'" It's unknown what happened to the Grail after this dinner, but there are a few medieval legends surrounding it. During the reign of King Arthur, many people believed that the cup had magical properties, and Arthur took his knights on a quest to try and find the Grail. Some people believe that Joseph of Arimathea, the man who had buried Jesus, had traveled to Britain and taken the cup with him. As some scholars think the Last Supper might have never even happened, we'll probably never be able to find the true Holy Grail.
Coming up at our number 10 spot, we have a throwing spear. A throwing spear that was approximately crafted over 10,300 years ago was discovered by Dr. Craig Lee from Montana State University in 2007. It was discovered in northern Wyoming. 10,300 years ago, holy moly. Just saying that is so trippy and hard to wrap my brain around the idea of people existing at that point. But in any case, this spear at first glance appeared just like a stick, but then after closer inspection, he discovered that it was a dart from a throwing spear. At this point, it is the oldest frozen artifact found yet. It's been a source of inspiration for others to continue the hunt for artifacts that are being revealed as a result of melting ice patches, and it certainly has created a sense of urgency for people to get hunting for these unbelievable items. In our number 9 spot, we have the Yukon treasures. A size 4 moccasin shoe from 1400 years ago was found melting in the Yukon, and my inner shopaholic is super excited about it. So of course I had to include it on this list. Along with the shoe, 2 other items were found: a barbed antler projectile point from about 1200 years ago, and throwing darts from 9,000 years ago. Apparently they were found by a husband and wife in 1997 who were hunting Dall sheep in the Yukon mountains when they smelt something extremely strange. It was dung. Yes, poop from a caribou. But the thing is, caribou hadn't been in this area for many years, so they decided to inspect it. Naturally? I wouldn't. Anyways, I guess they discovered that the poop was from thousands of years ago that had frozen into ice, and close behind it were these artifacts that had melted along with it. Pretty wild. In our number 8 spot, we have animal hair rope. While out exploring the mountaintops of western Mongolia, archaeologist and researcher Isaac Hart of the University of Utah discovered something quite interesting that he felt would truly help with discovering more about the Mongolia people in ancient times. They discovered a finely woven piece of animal hair rope. This rope was first thought to have been dropped in the ice recently. However, after scientists performed some radiocarbon tests on it to see how old it was proven to be more than 1,500 years old. Wow, that's some old rope. In our number 7 spot, we have horn curls. On this same trip, looking for more artifacts, Isaac Hart found some Argali sheep skulls and horn curls from 1,500 years ago, which were stacked in a pile by ancient hunters, and this finding completely discounted some old assumptions about the Mongolian people in the past. They were long thought to be herding societies, but these findings show that perhaps they were big hunters on mountain ice. Wow, sometimes just talking about this just makes me feel super grateful to be alive today. Although we are all wimps now, just going outside when it's cold, you know, I'm already looking for the outdoor heater. Where's the outdoor heater? What are we in ancient times? In our number 6 spot, we have Iron Age tunic. Apparently, as Norway's glaciers begin to melt, archaeologists are beginning to uncover a ridiculous amount of ancient treasures, and some say it is about 2,000 plus items to date. One of the most notable items, in my opinion, is some recovered clothing that was found. Honestly, not one item is better than the other. They all tell a story from the past and help us better understand how mountain populations lived. But still, I think it is so cool to see that they found some clothing that's approximately from 300 AD, an Iron Age tunic to be exact. That's not that old though compared to some of the other items that were found on this dig that were approximately 4,000 years old, but still, pretty cool. And one of the older items that was found is in our number 5 spot today, which is the walking stick. Now this item also is not as old as some of the throwing darts that were found, but it's so unique and cool that I had to put it on the list. It's not just any old walking stick. It's a walking stick with runic inscription. Whoa, so cool. I actually have rocks with ruins on them at home that I bought from like a new agey store, and I love to look at them. Ruins are truly fascinating and quite beautiful, so I'm a big believer in symbology and the energy and power infused in symbols. So anyways, when I saw this recovered walking stick from the 11th century AD, I kind of freaked out and needed to share. In our number 4 spot, we have arrowheads. This is actually so cool. The entire video has been so fun to research, but finding this out was very interesting. I definitely need to go to museums more. I don't think I knew that I enjoyed history so much. Anyways, in 2003, a hiker was walking in a mountain pass near Sion, Switzerland, when he came across some treasures. Not gold, sadly, but what he found were items that are arguably way cooler from a Stone Age hunter from over 3,000 years ago. They were fragments of a bow, an arrow case, arrowheads, and leg coverings, all believed to be revealed due to the ice in the glaciers melting due to the rapidly changing climate. Pretty crazy. Imagine just going for a hike and discovering some ancient artifacts. I bet you there will never be a more interesting moment in your life. Although fine, the birth of your future child could be fairly special too. In our number 3 spot, we have the Viking whisks. Technically not considered ancient artifacts, but I thought this was cool and it needed an honorable mention. The melting of glaciers in Norway has actually revealed a lost mountain pass, and with it, hundreds of Viking artifacts have been discovered. The pass was discovered back in 2011, as ever since, the glaciers have continued to melt and more artifacts have been recovered. The archaeologists believe the pass was used from the Roman Iron Age 300 AD to the Viking Age 1000 AD. From horseshoes to sled fragments to wooden needles to wooden whisks, all kinds of artifacts have been recovered. One of the most unique items include a Viking mitten and a blue textile rug. Wow, imagine finding a rug frozen on a mountain. Also, it's just wild to think that the Vikings had rugs. All I can think of when I think of Vikings is war, so it's probably just me and my limited imagination due to my limited knowledge of history. In our number 2 spot, we have arrowheads. Over 100,000 artifacts were recently uncovered in a place called Nunavik in Alaska. These artifacts belong to the Yupik peoples who lived there. There have been stories told over many centuries of a gruesome massacre that occurred during the bow and arrow war days, which was a series of long, brutal battles. Up until recently, the area had been frozen in the subsoil known as permafrost. The most notable items that were found were the slate arrow points that further proved the stories that have been told about these war times. Although these items aren't technically ancient, they are truly a wonder for archaeologists to discover, and I thought it needed to be on this list. In our number 1 spot, we have an ancient lunchbox. A 3,500-year-old lunchbox was discovered in Switzerland in the Swiss Alps. No, it didn't have a 3,500-year-old cheese sandwich in it, but it did have traces of ancient cereal. Whoa, some ancient dude was just walking around the Alps eating an ancient version of Lucky Charms. The lunchbox is a Bronze Age wooden container, and apparently the food traces were of wheat and barley or rye grains. The lunchbox was made from Swiss pine, and its rim was made from willow, sewn together with European larch twigs. It was found in a melting ice patch in 2012. That's incredible. Probably my fave find on this list, but anything to do do with food just makes me excited. Excuse me as I go pour myself a bowl of Lucky Charms. Feel free to join me if you like. Starting off this countdown, we have King Tut's dagger. Upon excavating the tomb of King Tut in 1925, scientists discovered a long 34-centimeter dagger wrapped up with King Tut. Now, back then there was no way for them to do studies on the dagger without damaging it. However, an X-ray done in 1970 showed that the dagger was made of some interesting compounds, primarily nickel and iron. Back then, iron was considered very rare. And how could it have been composed of iron when his burial predated Egypt's Iron Age by nearly 2,000 years? So right there, that's a little shocking. As a result of the iron and nickel composition, scientists have declared it was made from extraterrestrial metal. Now, there are two theories here. One is that a meteorite crashed down and then they used that to make the dagger. Theory 2 is that the dagger was made by aliens and dropped or left by them accidentally. I mean, some honestly do think that the ancient Egyptians were in contact with aliens. If that's the case, then the dagger might have originally been from the ETs.
Coming in number 9 with the Dropa stones. The Dropa stones are maybe the wildest discovery when it comes to artifacts from space. These are basically CDs from 10,000 years ago that have a whole story on them that talk about aliens crash landing on Earth and then giving some tools to humans. Okay, let me backtrack a little bit. These stones were found in a cave in China. At first glance, they seem to have hieroglyphs all over them, and almost like they were created for a phonograph. When deciphered, there was a whole story of aliens coming to Earth that were named the Dropa. They crashed on Earth, met humans in the area, gave them tech, fixed their ship, and then bounced. When you play these Dropa discs, they hum and vibrate like they're creating some sort of energy. And that is where all the research stops. On the record, these things were just put away and no one ever looked at them again. But you and I both know that is a bunch of horse poop. These were obviously taken somewhere to be researched behind a watchful eye.
Coming in at number 8, we have the US Delta II rocket. Back in January of 1997, a woman named Lottie Williams was out minding her own business on a nice little walk. To her surprise, she was greeted by a streak of light in the sky. All of a sudden, she felt something brush her shoulder. Turns out that this thing that brushed her was part of a US Delta II rocket. The rocket was launched in 1996. A year later, it came crashing down in pieces. Lottie said when she felt something brush by, she turned around and saw something on the ground. It was a small piece of burnt mesh. Now, she is extremely lucky because had it been a bigger piece, it probably would have knocked her down and killed her. Here's the thing, analysis shows that it's most likely part of the Delta II rocket. Most likely, still not 100% confirmed. For all we know, that could be a piece from an alien spacecraft.
Coming in at number 7, we have the pyramids. Here's the thing, do I actually think that pyramids came from space? Do I think that aliens came down from space and came to humans and were like, dudes, we're aliens, we're from the future, we got tech, it's so cool, it's gonna blow your socks off, and we're gonna make a civilization so sick with some big triangles that come out of the ground, and you can put your coolest dead bodies in them. No, I don't think that. I think that the pyramids were made with an insane amount of manpower because back then life was cheaper than it is now, and you could just have an army of slaves move rocks until they physically couldn't and then could just bring in a new army. That's how I think they did it. Also, no one had a phone back then, so you couldn't even get distracted while you were on the job. What are you gonna try and do, build a sandcastle? That would have been impossible because there was literally no water around. But that being said, there are a lot of people who think that the pyramids could have been built by some alien coming down to Earth and giving humans the tools to build these monuments with the precision of having them pointing at north, east, south, and west, with some people thinking that they are power plants that could create electricity. I think most of the people who think that have never been to Egypt, but you know it's good to make those assumptions after watching 30 minutes worth of YouTube videos.
Moving on to number 6, we have the Russian tank. In March of 2011, a man was out hiking in northwestern Colorado when he came across something strange. The object was round and warm to touch. It was also in a crater, meaning whatever this was had just crashed down from space. The hiker then called military aerospace officials. Later, it was revealed that this weird object was the tank from a Russian Zenit 3 rocket. The rocket was launched in January. 2 months later, it came crashing back down. Fun fact, it's one of only a handful of space debris to be found in the US. But seriously, imagine being out for a walk and seeing something fly towards you from the sky. Like damn, that's another thing to worry about, being killed by space debris.
Coming in at number 5, we have the Roman decahedron. Some sort of 3D octagon, and no one knows what they do. Like 0 people have been able to figure out what these things were for, and one of the weirdest parts about them is that we have found a lot of them. They seem to all come from the Roman era and were moved out to every territory that the Romans controlled. There are over 100 of these strange devices that have been found, and there are several guesses as to what they could do. Some people think they could have been some sort of status symbol. To have one in your home would have meant you were rich and in good graces with the Emperor of Rome. They might have just been decoration, or they could have been some sort of communication device from space, and it's how the Romans were able to be so powerful.
In our 4th spot, we have the Roswell rock. This rock is a very weird rock with a detailed design. The rock is uniform in color, unusually smooth, and has a design protruding from the surface of it. This rock was found in Roswell, New Mexico in 2004 by a man named Robert Ridge. He was a deer hunter. Apparently, he found this rock half sticking out of the ground and was shocked by its unusual and perfect design, as well as its strange magnetic properties. Upon analyzing it, people have realized that the rock's design actually matches a crop circle that was found in England in 1996, which makes this whole thing that much weirder. Now, some are convinced that this rock is some message sent by aliens. After experts have analyzed the design, they notice that it's a pattern of a sun and a moon inside of a circle. A woman named Linda Moulton Howe, who's an investigative journalist, believes that aliens are trying to teach us about astronomy with this rock, or that the rock contains a date for some event that has or will happen. It's pretty spooky. I just wish we knew more about this weird rock.
Coming in number 3, we have fungus. When you look at all the living beings on this planet, why has fungus got its own spot? I mean, those things are just plants, right? Wrong. Fungus are some of the most advanced life forms on the planet. They have functionality that spreads in extreme diversity from species to species. Some of them have the ability to mind control a host and then kill it so it spreads spores. Others have advanced communication techniques that allow them to find the most direct routes to one another. Because of this, there's speculation that fungus might have come here by aliens or might have touched down on Earth via meteor.
And at number 2, we have the Betts Mystery Sphere. On March 27th, 1974, the Betts family were out examining a small bushfire near their property. While doing so, the family came across a completely smooth metal sphere. It was about the size of a bowling ball. On this sphere, there was a triangle engraved in it. They took it home only to find that it had strange properties. One day when their son was playing his guitar in the same room as this sphere, it started to emit a throbbing sound from it. The sound was strong enough to hurt the family's dog's ears. This sphere can also change directions, so if you push it across the floor, it will roll forward and then stop and then roll back all on its own. It's also said to be able to absorb power from solar energy. It's said to be more active when exposed to the sun. Now, they refused to let anyone analyze it until they linked the sphere to paranormal activity that was happening around the house. Like doors would slam by themselves and they would hear this weird organ music. Now, scientists have analyzed it and they said it was just a normal sphere. How late? But the family is convinced that something is controlling it. Maybe something of the extraterrestrial nature. Seriously, where did this sphere come from and what's the deal with its weird properties? Seems like it came from space.
And coming at the number 1 spot, we have alien coins. So who do we always see plastered on coins? Well, it's our most rich and famous people, the ones that define our culture at the time, or the rulers that control the area, and if you don't put their face on the money, they will for sure cut your head off. Well, then there's a bunch of questions as to why some alien coins were found in Egypt. There was a massive renovation done on some homes in Egypt, which dug up one of the strangest artifacts to date. They were a series of coins that were found that had not a queen's head on them or a pharaoh, but an alien dude, like the one that looks like he's pulled right out of the movies, like the green dude with the big head and the green skin, and you know, all that stuff going on. You guys know what I'm talking about. But this dude had like a toga on, so he kind of looked a little bit boss. There were also several coins that were found that seemed to have spaceships on them. If the ruler theory is right, there could have been an alien ruler who came down from the stars in ancient Egypt, someone who maybe crash landed and needed to get his ship fixed, and while he was waiting for his repairs to be done, he was worshipped like a god.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Dropa stones. In 1938, archaeologist Dr. Chipute led an expedition near the Bayan Har Mountains in China. That's when they came across some interesting caves. These caves held evidence that ancient life once lived in them. After searching the caves, they found weird discs buried under thick layers of dust. These discs resembled phonograph records. Researchers dated them to be over 10,000 years old. Now, they didn't play music like a typical record, but instead they had hieroglyphics carved into them. When studied, it told a story about a spaceship that crashed into the mountains. Aboard the spaceship were people that called themselves the Dropa. Then later on, the discs were sent to Moscow for further studying. That's when they were placed on this special turntable, and the discs would vibrate or hum in a weird rhythm, as if an electric charge was passing through them. After that, research on the discs stopped. Or some believe research continued and they found/contacted alien life, which they just didn't tell the public. Either way, this is said to be one of the most mysterious artifacts in the world. In our 9th spot, we have the alien. And guys, here's just your little friendly reminder to hit that thumbs up button. In 2017, a man in Cusco made a pretty terrifying discovery in the southern desert of Peru. The artifact he found looks exactly like a tiny mummified alien head. An X-ray concluded that the skull had very alien-type features. The skull had angled eyelids with shallow eye sockets, 2 nostrils, and a narrow slit-type mouth. Now, whoever was in possession of the skull actually covered it in a type of clay, so that's what you see on the top of it, which makes it appear to look more like an alien. Researchers discovered that it is indeed a real skull, but they don't know what it belonged to. So it may just be that this skull belonged to a real-life alien from space. Moving on to number 8, we have the Wedge of Aiud. Back in 1974, construction workers in Romania were working in a village in Aiud when they came across some pretty weird objects. These objects were buried 30 feet in the sand by a river. 2 of the objects were bones from mastodons, which are very distant relatives of an elephant. I mean, that's cool and all, but the thing that really caught their attention was this mysterious wedged-shaped object that was located by the bones. This object contained 89% aluminum, 6% copper, and a total of 12 elements altogether. Here's the thing. Aluminum was discovered around 1825, yet this wedge lay next to bones that are from 11,000 years ago. The timeline just doesn't add up. The wedge itself is theorized to be around 10,000 years old. People believe that this object couldn't have existed way back then. An aeronautical engineer stated that this object looks exactly like a piece of a landing gear for landing aircrafts. This has left researchers to believe that aliens crashed their craft from space maybe 11,000 years ago. In our 7th spot, we have the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone is a piece of a stone slab found in 1799. It has a message carved into it written in 3 different types of scripts. You got ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, Demotic scripts, and ancient Greek. This stone is the key to decipher Egyptian scripts. In 1814, British scientist Thomas Young started studying the stone and made some progress on cracking it. But it wasn't until 1822 to 1824 that the hieroglyphic code was finally cracked. This was done by French linguist Jean-François Champollion. It's hypothesized that the slab was created in Egypt in 196 BC, but we still don't know who created it. Now, this one is more of a conspiracy, but it's actually thought that the Rosetta Stone was made by aliens, and they delivered it to us from space. Obviously, there's no solid evidence to support this. In fact, archaeologist Paul Wasson believes the Rosetta Stone has lessons to teach us about creating a message that will allow us to communicate with aliens. Because we can't just assume that aliens speak English. In our 6th spot, we have the UFO tooth wheel. This is another artifact that is said to have come from aliens in space. So basically, back in the day, a Russian man was using coal to heat his home when he saw something sticking out of a piece of coal. He reported his findings, and researchers said it looked like a tooth wheel to some device. After tests were run on it, it was discovered that it was composed of 98% aluminum and 2% magnesium. Now remember what I said before? Humans discovered how to first make aluminum in 1825. But the piece of coal this artifact was found in was 300 million years old. So how is that even possible? In fact, the tooth wheel resembles parts that we currently use in microscopes and electronic devices. Again, back in the day, they didn't have any of those devices, so what the heck. Scientists are still running tests on this object to one day figure out who created it and figure out what its original purpose was. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the iron beads. Back in the day, it was found that ancient Egyptians created iron beads. They were carefully hammered into thin sheets, and then they would roll these into tubes. Then they would string them together and make a necklace. While studying them, they found the necklaces were over 5,000 years old. It was also revealed that the beads were made out of pieces from meteorites, and then they would hammer that down. Not only that, but it was revealed that the Egyptians had a more advanced understanding of metalsmithing than we originally thought. Moving on to number 4, we have the valuable meteorite. There's a meteorite out there that is more valuable than gold. It was April 23, 2019, and a weird colorful orb flew across the skies of Costa Rica. It was orange and green in color. This object was about the size of a washing machine. And then, just like that, it broke up into pieces that got scattered between 2 villages. One of the pieces was discovered by a woman named Marcia Campos Munoz. She heard the rumble and saw something crash down on her property. She was one of the few people to find a piece of this meteorite. Now, meteorites show up all the time on Earth, so what's so special about this one? Well, it turns out they belong to a rare class called carbonaceous chondrites. They formed when the solar system was still developing. It's believed that these pieces of meteorites will help us figure out what early solar system life was like. Moving on, at number 3, we have the ancient battery. Back in 1936, outside of Baghdad, a weird discovery was made. They discovered a small clay jar with an iron rod hanging in a copper cylinder in it. This was then soldered shut and sealed with asphalt. Upon analyzing it, it was discovered to produce small amounts of electricity. In fact, researchers said it looks like an ancient battery. However, we still don't know who created this and what its purpose was. But many people believe that this was a battery from an alien spacecraft that crashed down on Earth several thousands of years ago. Aliens are said to be very advanced species, so it could be that they figured out batteries and electricity way before humans ever did. Coming in at number 2, we have the alien spacecraft. In 2017, a Hawaiian man with a telescope spotted this weird object leaving the solar system. This object was named Oumuamua, and it's considered the first known interstellar object detected passing through the solar system. Here's the thing. Many people believe that this thing is an alien spacecraft. Let me explain. This thing looks like a space rock, but it's not a comet or asteroid. It's too small and oddly shaped to be an asteroid. The thing is long and shaped like a rocket. No asteroids that we know of are shaped like that. Not only that, but astronomers thought the first space rock to enter our solar system would be a ball of ice and rocks. A comet. But usually there's a cloud of dust and gas surrounding comets, and this object doesn't have that. So then what on earth is it? On top of that, it's said to emit blue colors from it. As a result, rumor has it that it's actually an alien spacecraft. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Hypatia stone. In 2013, a weird stone made its way to Earth from space. This stone has managed to leave scientists baffled. They claim it's unlike any other extraterrestrial rock ever found. In 2015, while analyzing the stone, they found it was not part of a meteorite or comet. So they were puzzled as to where it came from. Researcher Jan Kramer said, and I quote, "The stone's matrix contains a high amount of very specific carbon compounds, called polyaromatic hydrocarbons, or PAH, a major component of interstellar dust, which existed even before our solar system was formed." Meaning, this stone is super old. Like, it was around before the sun and planets had formed. It's mind-blowing, and they still haven't found out all about it. Starting off this countdown, we have the stolen artifact of Pompeii. This story has been in the news a lot lately. So after enduring 15 years of bad luck, a Canadian woman returned an artifact that she stole from Pompeii. So this woman, identified as Nicole, apparently stole some mosaic tiles, stones, pieces of plaster, and other little artifacts from the archaeological park of Pompeii during her trip there in 2005. 15 years later, she mailed the artifacts back with a note explaining that she experienced nothing but bad luck after taking the objects. She struggled both financially and physically. In the letter, she wrote that she suffered from breast cancer twice. She wanted to put an end to the curse and didn't want her family to suffer from her actions, so she sent the pieces back.
Moving on to number 9, we have the lost treasure of the Lydian. This treasure was found back in the 60s, and it was seen as one of the best archaeological discoveries of its time. It was found in Turkey, and it was said that there were over 300 pieces of golden ware. If you were down there, you could have been balling out of control, wearing all that fancy jewelry and making yourself look like a stud. But you would quickly become overcome with gold sickness. This is the apparent curse that is attached to these treasures. Gold sickness is when someone will start to get ill over time, but also have an affinity to collect gold. It's like an uncontrollable urge to stockpile gold like you're some sort of dragon. You'll slurp up gold faster than Joey Chestnut scarfs down ice. This curse may have been solidified in 2006. One of the pieces was being returned from America to Turkey, and it was discovered to be a fake. That means someone made a replica and then stole the original. Could this curse have pushed them to make this theft, and now the person is somewhere hoarding large amounts of gold? Maybe this is why CEOs do whatever they can to collect large amounts of wealth they can never spend.
Coming in at number 8, we have the ballista balls. Back in the 1980s, a crew excavated hundreds of Roman ballista balls on the border of Israel and Syria. These were used as cannonballs during the Great Revolt. There were so many of them that one man decided to take 2. I mean, surely they wouldn't notice that 2 were missing, right? And honestly, he was right, no one noticed. But in 2015, the balls were returned to the museum's courtyard along with a note from the thief. The note read, and I quote, "I stole them in July 1995, and since then they have brought me nothing but trouble. Please do not steal antiquities." Use that as a warning, folks.
Coming in at number 7, we have voodoo dolls. I mean, we should know that these are not to be messed with, but for some reason people don't take cursed objects seriously, and they pay the price. A pair of voodoo dolls were stolen from an occult museum in New Orleans. The owner said that they noticed this and they didn't feel any sort of anger because they knew that the person who stole them would feel the fury of the dolls before the sun set on the city. When someone says something as ominous as that, you know that they mean business. She continued to say that the museum was the dolls' home and they will be wicked if they are not returned. Just 2 days later, a man returned with the dolls. Apparently he was missing teeth, missing fingernails, had pus coming out of his gums, and had sores all over his body. And outside of being in an extreme amount of pain, he said that he was haunted by visions of his own death. The museum owner laughed and told him to go to the hospital and gladly took back the dolls.
Moving on, number 6, we have the souvenir. Look, I get it. You go on a vacation somewhere and you want a souvenir or something to remember your trip by. But don't steal. Instead, just go get something from the local gift shop. I mean, that's what gift shops are there for. Now, one place in particular that is a hot spot for thieves is Arizona's Petrified Forest National Park. Over the years, thousands of individuals have stolen petrified forest rocks from there. One woman in particular stole an artifact, and this is what happened to her. She claims, and I quote, "Upon returning home, we first found out that my stepmother had kidney failure. Then our dog died. I had a really close call in having a bad auto accident. Our truck broke down needing major repairs. Our cat died. And last night a gas well blew out a cap causing us to be evacuated from our home. So please take these pieces back before we have any more bad luck." Man, those objects are extremely cursed. So far, they have had 1,200 antiques returned back to them, all sent with letters saying that they were cursed with bad luck.
Coming in at number 5 is Little Bastard. This is one of the most famous cursed items of all time. This was a car driven by James Dean, and it would end up being his doom. But he didn't steal this cursed vehicle, but there were some people who definitely tried. After the accident that took the life of the famous movie star, the car car was taken to a body shop where they started to strip it for parts. One night a group of thieves came in to take off with some parts from this car. Now we don't know if these people targeted the body shop or if they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, one of these thieves tried to strip a part off the engine and the whole thing came crashing down on top of him and killed him. The other two men got away swiftly, but that was just one of the many deaths connected to the Porsche 550 Spider.
In our fourth spot, we have King Tut's Cobra Staff. So of course, you all probably have heard the urban legend surrounding King Tut and his curse. Basically, it said that King Tut's tomb and all the artifacts that were inside are cursed. And this might indeed be true. After the expedition of King Tut's tomb, several men mysteriously died. Well, rumor has it that this happened all because one of the men stole King Tut's Cobra Staff. Archaeologist Howard Carter claimed that when they found King Tut's tomb, it was already robbed. But this may have been a cover-up. It's thought that him and his team took a couple of artifacts as souvenirs, in particular the Cobra Staff. In fact, one of Carter's team members, James Henry Breasted, returned home to find his pet canary eaten by a cobra, and the cobra was still in the cage. Cobra Staff goes missing, and a cobra is found in his home. Coincidence? I think not.
Coming in at number 3, we have Timur's body. When you take a dude out of his tomb, is that stealing? I think so. During World War II, Joseph Stalin had the bright idea that he would mess around with some dark magic during a pivotal moment of the war. I don't know if he was a superstitious man, but I think he should have been, because maybe he could have prevented this. Timur was one of the most ruthless conquerors in history. It said that 17 million people died because of this dude. He was at the helm of one of the largest empires in history. On his tomb it said, "He who disturbs me shall unleash an enemy more ruthless than I." And on the day that Stalin dug up Timur, Hitler did his surprise attack on the Soviets. Bad move, Stalin. Sounds like you really dropped the ball on this one. Well, I think that Stalin is a stubborn dude and didn't want to bury him again, but eventually he broke and decided that the curse was real and buried Timur again. And then the Soviets had their first victory against the Germans.
In our second spot, we have the Egyptian hieroglyphs. Back in 2004, an unnamed German man stole an ancient Egyptian artifact displaying hieroglyphic text. A couple of months later, the artifact was sent back to Egypt by the man's son. The man had died, so he couldn't do it himself. Apparently, shortly after returning home from his trip, the man's health randomly started to decline. He got unexplained paralysis and fevers. Shortly after, he developed cancer and died. The man's son believed that his father was subjected to the pharaoh's curse, and he sent the artifact back in hopes to end it.
And coming in at the number 1 spot is the most evil car in America, the 1964 Dodge 330. This vehicle will go down in history as one of the most horrific four-wheelers to ever meet the blacktop. This thing has a ton of spooky events that have been tied to it. It started off as a police cruiser. You think something that had the purpose of serving up justice would have a noble heart. Well, if you had that opinion about this car, you would be dead wrong. There were 3 officers who had the misfortune of driving the 330, and each one of them would die in a murder suicide. It eventually worked its way into the public, and the first owner said that the car seemed like it was constantly trying to kill her as the doors would fly open and the steering would jam while she was on the highway. Eventually, a church caught wind of this devil's chariot and they went to go vandalize it so no one could drive it again. Every last person involved in this mission died. Some of them were decapitated and others were struck by lightning. Eventually the car was stolen and taken to a chop shop, and where it was broken down into parts, and these parts were separated into different corners of the world so this car could never harm anyone again. God damn.